Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lurking for Legends, a live video cast where we talk with people from all walks of the publishing industry. I'm Christy Stratus, author of the historical suspense series, The Dark Victoriana Collection, and my awesome co-host is Richard H. Stevens, epic fantasy author of the series Soulforge Universe, Soulforge Saga, and more. Lurking for Legends is a live interactive broadcast, and we encourage viewers to chime in with questions for our guests, or just to simply make comments in the chat about what you hear in the show. So tonight we have Gothic horror and literary speculative fiction author Jennifer Ann Gordon. Welcome, Jennifer. It's so great to have you.
Hi, Christy. Hey, Richard. Thank you so much for having me.
I've really been looking forward to this. Last week we had a different Jennifer Ann, and this week
I saw
you.
that.
Yeah.
What's so funny is I saw it last week and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to be on. And I'm like, oh no, that's not even me.
That is so funny. Yeah, it really cracked me up when I saw both of you. So let's start out with you just telling us about yourself and, just your writing in general. And then we'll get into your most recent book.
Okay. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Again, my name is Jennifer Ann Gordon. I am the author of the Kindle award-winning novel, Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent. So that won the Kindle Award for 2020 for Best Horror and Suspense Novel. I am also the author of the Victorian horror series, The Hotel, which includes From Daylight to Madness and When the Sleeping Dead Still Talk. I host a podcast called Vox Vomitus, which is the #1 video cast on the Global Authors on the Air network, where I talk to authors who are bestsellers, who are just starting out, and everywhere in between. And we talk about what went right and what went very, very wrong in the process. So I'm from New Hampshire. That's about it.
I think that's always so interesting to hear about the what has gone wrong for different people. So that always kind of hooks me for sure.
It's humbling too, and I feel like it's like a master class when you talk to people who are like a Josh Mallerman or a Paul Tremblay or Alma Katsu, or like these amazing people who I look up to, and they are right there with you going, there are times that I just have to throw out an entire draft because it's, or axe an entire character, or you get to that mushy part in the middle and you think, I don't know what's happening now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, as you said, it's humbling. And a masterclass. I like how you said that as well. That is so true. And somehow we hold people on a pedestal when they're so good and we really admire their writing, and we seem to think inevitably that it must be easier for them, or that they just do one draft and that's pretty much it with editing. And as we've seen on your show and everything, we find out that is absolutely not the case, and it's pretty comforting actually for writers. I think
I've been very comforted to talk to people again that I admire so much, that talk about how they still give their work to beta readers and they still get feedback back from beta readers that say this is not working for me. And you're just you're a New York Times #1 bestseller, and you still have a group of people that are not this time, that needs some work. So I love that, because at the end of the day, we're all just alone in front of our computer or in front of our notebook or in front of a typewriter, and we have to learn to trust ourselves and trust our mistakes.
So kudos to these big name authors too that actually take the advice from the beta readers. You would think that once you get so big that you would just say, I know what I'm doing, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. And for them to take the advice, or at least consider it, is very
I think, I know with me, when I my beta readers, I trust them so much. Some of them have been with me for years and years. Some of them I switch out and get new ones, so I don't have always the same opinions. But it's such a great relationship, I think, the author has to have with their beta reading team, that you have to have people that you absolutely trust their opinion and respect their opinion. Because to me, I wouldn't want somebody reading my book that, I don't want to say that I don't know, but I want that opinion to mean something to me. So I'm still nervous when I give my books to my beta readers. I'm what if they hate it? And it's kind of good when they do, or when they hate certain parts of it, or when they just say, these 4 chapters make no sense. Is this person dreaming? It's what is this?
They're being totally honest.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, well, on that note, tell us about your latest book, which is Pretty Ugly, and you can find it by searching Pretty/Ugly.
Yes, or Pretty Ugly Jennifer Ann Gordon. There's a lot of books that have the words pretty and ugly in them. So that book is being released July 13th. It is available for pre-order now everywhere on Kindle, in paperback, anywhere you want. So Pretty Ugly, I originally thought of as, a few years ago when I got the idea, it was going to be a dystopian romantic comedy. But then writing it during a pandemic, during like a lockdown and a shutdown, I realized that there wasn't a lot of funny things happening during the end of the world. So the book ended up having some dark comedy, but it ended up being more about character development and people who had things happen to them in their childhood that they never really dealt with. And now the world is ending and it's time for them to kind of deal with their past grief, past trauma. So it follows an Instagram influencer named Amelia and a failed politician named Sam as they battle their own personal demons and, you know, maybe find themselves forgiving themselves and forgiving other people at the end of the world.
That is, to me, that's a very unique concept. And, you know, I like the idea of finally working things out, you know, within yourself at the end of the world. Whereas I would be like, it's over anyway. What's the difference?
I know.
I think that's a great concept, actually. You know, this is my last chance to make peace with myself, sort of.
Yeah. So, I think we all just had the same pandemic. And I think there was a lot of like, I know for me and a lot of the writers I know, there was just a lot of that like introspection in our house, completely alone. And there were days that I was like, you know, I don't want to say screw it, but like, who knows what's going to happen? But then, you know, like 3 months into this, I started thinking, like, what if I got sick? What if the people I loved got sick? What would I have wished for myself when I was like right before I was going to die? Like, what would I have wished? And what would I have wished for my loved ones? So the story took on like a very bittersweet feeling. And I just fell in love with my characters so much more than I thought I was going to, because I originally thought of them as like caricatures and not characters. And once I found out who they really were, like who they were when they were kids, the story just started to tell itself.
That is really cool. And I'm sorry, Richard, I keep stealing Jennifer.
No worries. Go on.
Christy and I are basically like sisters. Like
yeah, we know.
You guys kind of write in the same genre, so to speak. You like Gothic and Victorian and all that. So, and you guys were talking about that before we went on air about some kind of Gothic tea party that you guys were thinking. Victorian tea party.
It's
coming. Get ready, everyone.
People are like, do we want to see that? Yes.
Should
we have outfits. Should we watch that? Is that just for them? Is that for us? Who knows?
I love it.
Don't mention before the show, Jennifer, that you're going to be entering a writing challenge. Now, you know, we have NaNoWriMo, we have the one in April, they seem to have them all over the place. This one is a little bit different than NaNoWriMo. Tell us a little bit about that. And you're a little bit worried that you might be grumpy after 31 days straight of.
I will. And I've already told the instructor, the amazing author Diane Zinna, she is leading this challenge. So far, I mean, it's a very small group. It's about 12 of us who have committed to 31 days of 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, an hour of morning pages. There are people that are joining from other parts of the country. So for them, it's much earlier. So I shouldn't complain for the people on the West Coast that are like willing to get up at like 4 a.m. or the people in Chicago. So yeah, it's a 31-day challenge that will include private writing time, writing prompts, and just support if you need support. But like I said to you guys, I am not a morning person at all. I think of getting up at 8 a.m. as being early. And I tend to only get up really, really early when I have to go to the airport. And I haven't been to the airport in like a year and a half. So I'm very out of practice.
Sounds like it's going to be good, though, you know, with the different kinds of writing as well, like you're saying, private writing time, and then also maybe some prompts. Maybe if you're stuck, you know, there'll be something that you can unstick yourself with a bit. So that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, and I've come to realize for the first time in my life, I'm writing a book that's not horror at all. So it's been a strange process for me. So it's been great to get writing prompts that are just seem random, and I realize that I can work them into like developing my characters.
So are there any goals in this challenge at all? Like, is it like you have to meet so many words, or
No,
it's just to motivate you to
it's
sit
just,
down and write?
yes, it's just motivating.
Right.
But I mean, I have had private conversations that are, I'll have them here with you guys. I have told the instructor my goal for the end of this month is to finish at least the rough draft of my novel that I'm working on.
Nice.
So I think I can do it.
You can do it. You got this.
You absolutely can. You already are over 60,000 words in 60,000 words into it.
Yes,
So that's helpful. And what is this? Tell us this new genre, please.
I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to. I know. I keep saying like I'm writing something, but I can't really talk about it. I do have a really amazing agent, and she has sworn me to secrecy about this project because she believes in it a lot. And when I pitched it to her, she said, write it fast. Don't tell anyone what it is. And so that's been also a very strange process for me, because usually I have a core group of people that my beta readers, my writing circle that I'm able to talk to. And now I pretty much just blab to my poor husband, who is probably tired of hearing about it at this point.
Oh, that's what he's there for, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I married him. So I will say it's not horror, but it is. It's still darker fiction.
Okay.
It's not like happy. It's not a romance or a happily ever after thing. I've got to stick to my roots of just.
I was reading in your bio that it says you're a contributor to ladies of horror fiction, Horror Tree, Writers After Dark, Readers Entertainment Magazine, and Ginger Nuts of Horror. And I stopped there and I said, what? And I guess it must be the hair. Is it? Is that what the Ginger Nuts of Horror is?
It is a website that is run by somebody who is in Scotland, I believe. So okay. I would probably assume, I could be wrong, that many of the people who started that website might be gingers. As somebody with Scottish descent and red hair, I would say it's probably a pretty good chance.
Yeah, it was just an interesting title, Ginger Nuts of Horror. I thought it was interesting.
So I know the most recent book, Pretty Ugly, is, and Anita Stewart is saying Ginger Nuts of Horror is great. So with Pretty Ugly, it is more modern. And of course, your previous books have been one of them was a combination of modern and, historical time period.
Yeah.
And then, two of them were Victorian era type of time period. So was it like a conscious decision to start writing in a more modern time period, or did it just come to you that way?
I had the idea for it even before I started my hotel series. And I kept thinking, because again, I thought it was going to be a dystopian rom-com. And I kept thinking, it's going to be so easy to write a book that is super contemporary. It's about people being on their phones and checking their computers. And it's the world we live in. It's going to be easy breezy. And it was harder than I thought it was going to be, because I'd been writing like historical and deep Gothic for so long that it was hard to give all of that up. So there are still some Gothic, I hate to say tropes, but a lot of Gothic tropes in Pretty Ugly. It's I've had a couple people who blurbed it. I think Sean Cosby said it was a modern Gothic, and I loved that. There's still a ghost.
There has to be. It's not a Jennifer Ann Gordon story if there isn't a ghost.
I know. I was just like, I have to put a ghost in there someplace.
Should I try to trick you into telling us if there's a ghost in the new one?
I almost just like blurted it right out. There's no ghost, but there is a water damaged copy of Pet Sematary that might as well be a ghost. I'll give you that.
It's something. We'll take it.
It's something. I'm like, what can I say that really doesn't give anything away from the plot?
JD Estrada is unafraid. Hey, JD. Cool.
So you're also a host, a co-host of a couple different podcasts, Writer Showcase being one of them, and you are also the creator of Vox Vomitus.
Yes.
Now, what exactly is Vox Vomitus for us who are not in the know?
So Vox Vomitus is fake Latin for word vomit. I originally wanted to call the podcast Word Vomit, but that was already copywritten. So we had to, my co-host and I had to kind of brainstorm different versions of word vomit. So vomit draft or blah, blah, blah. And I don't know how I stumbled upon Vox Vomitus. I think I was just like looking up words, and Vox means voice or to speak in Latin. And then vomitus is not the Latin word for vomit, but it sounds good enough that I thought people would understand it. And yeah, we talk about kind of the good and the bad of writing. So the word vomit of it, which is, the messy first drafts, the characters that nobody liked, plot lines that went nowhere and ended up kind of messing up your whole book for a little while. So we talk about that. We also talk about the successes, of course, but the bumpy road to get there.
Very, very necessary question from JD. So what's the Latin word for vomit?
I know vomitorium doesn't mean vomit, but it means to exit or an exit. So I think that is actually the root of the word vomit, but I don't know this is taken a turn. Sorry, everybody who has vomit phobias. I've said the word so many times. So I think that might actually be the root of the word vomit, but I'll have to look up the actual word for if there is a Latin word for vomit. I took Latin and it wasn't ever on our vocab quizzes.
I would imagine, yeah. Probably not what you need to know to read any classic books in Latin.
I mean, you never know.
JD is saying, seen a couple of shows and Vox Vomitus is fun.
Thank you, JD.
Awesome. So speaking of the show, then you do Vox Vomitus. You also do the Writer's Showcase, and maybe let everyone know what the Writer's Showcase is all about. I imagine it's a little bit different than Vox Vomitus.
It is. I try not to swear on Writer's Showcase, and I focus on a lot on when I interview people. I know Christy is one of the co-hosts of that show as well. I talk about the craft of writing more and the experience of it. On Writer's Showcase, sometimes I get to talk to comic book authors as opposed to just novelists. So again, it's a lot about like the process, the craft of writing. I don't drink on Writer's Showcase. I do drink on Vox Vomitus because it's a party show.
Two different fields. One's a party.
Two different fields, I know. And the other one's like a dignified party. One's,
dignified.
A dignified party. And Vox Vomitus, the word vomit is in the title. So we're a little loosey-goosey on that show.
Have you found that being a podcast host has changed anything about we've already talked a little bit about how, guests can share their perspectives and, maybe change the way we look at writing sometimes, maybe even the way we look at our processes. But have you found that being a host, coming up with these questions and stuff like that has impacted your writing at all?
I'm not sure. That's a really good question to ask. I'm going to say being a host hasn't impacted my writing, but being a listener to my guests' answers has impacted my writing. So I think I would get just as much out of it if I was watching an episode and heard these authors. But it's been really great just like communicating with people that are, I think, at the top of their game and people that I have admired for years and have been able to, call some of these people my friends. And when Pretty Ugly was coming out, to be able, because I got to meet these amazing people, to ask them to blurb my book. And never in a million, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I never would have thought that Wendy Webb would have given me the cover quote for my book. And she's every single one of her books I've read. I love them all. So it's impacted my writing because I think it gives me a little bit more confidence in making mistakes and allowing myself to make mistakes and not beat myself up, because I've talked to a lot of people who also make mistakes and say things like they didn't know where their book was going to go. They had to put it on the shelf for a little while and then come back to it, and they didn't understand how to get to the end. Like they have the same problems we have. They're humans. So it's helped me be a little less neurotic during the writing process. A little less.
Just a little.
Just a little. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm still very neurotic.
It's sort of nice to hear that other authors have the same issues that you're having, like, you know, between releases and between being on air and speaking to people. You know, it's kind of a lonely profession we have where we're sitting in front of a screen. Lonely in the sense that you don't have a lot of interaction with other people around you. It's not lonely because you have all your characters in your head and they're talking back and forth to you and they're telling you that they want to do something and you want to go somewhere else with them. But so JD,
I just let my characters kind of take over.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
If they want to do something that I don't agree with, I just let them and then figure it out from there. Better. They do. They always do. Yeah. I mean, I've screamed at my computer too many times. Like, why did you make that decision?
Yeah.
And I've debated with my husband over this, who says, well, you can just delete it. You wrote it. And I'm like, I can't delete it. You don't know how this works. It's already in the it's out in the universe now.
Go back to the other room,
yeah. It's like putting something back into Pandora's box. It doesn't happen. It's out there. I know it happened. My characters know it happened.
Absolutely.
JD Estrada is asking, what are the 5 things that would be in every book by Jennifer Ann Gordon?
That should be in every book by Jennifer Ann Gordon? A ghost. Yes. A ghost.
That's one.
Whiskey. References to a different work of literature.
Interesting.
Something music or dance related. Usually with the rhythm of somebody's speech or breath or heartbeat. So that's 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I always do like to put a drowning someplace in there.
Is that where the ghost comes from?
Sometimes. I blame the Lady of Shalott for that one. Like, there's got to be somebody who drowns.
Anywhere. That's great. That was a great question, JD.
That was a great question. I don't know if I could answer that if someone asked me that.
I know. I was thinking that too. I was like, what will she say? I can't.
I know. I was just like, oh, gosh, all I have is ghost. Ghost and whiskey. That's all I have.
JD is saying, that last answer. Yeah, that was great.
The drowning person, yeah. That is interesting.
So you actually do a lot of art forms. So we know about, of course, podcasting and writing are kind of like interrelated, but you dance, and you were a ballroom dance choreographer, I think, and maybe more teacher. And you also do mixed media art, I believe. Like there's a lot of art in general that you do. And I was wondering how those things can interconnect with you sometimes. Like, do you ever do art about your writing, or like does one impact the other?
I used to do a lot more art than I do now, just because I feel like I don't have the physical space in my home to have a studio that I can work in, like an art studio that I can work in and leave a mess and then go back and write. Like I would constantly have to be cleaning up. But I used to do a lot of my artwork that's in my book, Victoriana, which is an art collection. A lot of that was actually based on my poetry that I'd written. So a lot of the titles to my pieces are lines from my poems. And then my husband and I, for a few years, did collaborative mixed media artwork, like large scale mixed media artwork that looks like walls in a decaying building. And we did that actually using vintage book paper. Multiple layers of it. So I think it always, everything's connected to a story, whether that's art, whether it's writing, whether it's dance. Like even as a ballroom dancer, every dance tells a story. I've never performed without thinking of a character that who would be doing this waltz. Because most of the time it's not, Jennifer from New Hampshire. Because after a while, that's not interesting.
Did I see in your bio somewhere that you were trained in acting or
Yes,
anything?
that's what I went to school for. That's like what I
So
thought was going to be my career.
yeah, well, it kind of plays into the idea of like
It
becoming your
does.
characters, and even for, dancing, as you said, like
Yeah.
becoming somebody else. That's kind of, yeah, it's pretty cool.
And a lot of when I went to school for theater, it was acting specifically, um, I did, like 3 years of character development classes. And I used so much of what I did to develop a character for the stage into how I develop my characters that I write. So I'm very conscious all the time of what the other characters are saying about each character, because everything kind of, especially during your later drafts, like it all matters. It all paints a picture of your character. If somebody in another scene refers to them as something, like that's important.
So if we can go back to Pretty Ugly for a second and keep like jumping back, but the pandemic in the book. So you have a pandemic in the book. Is it the same as our current pandemic, or you created a different pandemic? Because I noticed the mask on the cover too, so I
Yeah.
wasn't sure.
So Pretty Ugly, I did create a virus. Well, I didn't create a virus. I have a friend who's a scientist who is much smarter than I am. So she was my research assistant. Her name is Patty. And she was my research assistant on this. I was already writing, and I didn't understand how like the science of it worked, even like what I was describing, because it was kind of heavy on the body horror. It's a virus that makes your face and your skin kind of peel and rot off. So if you do live through it, you end up very scarred, and you're still contagious. So that's why people wear masks for two reasons. One, because their face is completely scarred, and the other thing, the virus is still very much alive. So I kept thinking it was like an Ebola thing or leprosy, and I didn't realize leprosy was bacterial and not viral. And she talked me through how viruses work, and I explained to her all of the symptoms in my book, and then she was reading it and reading the symptoms, and I was telling her, like, this is what I want to happen, like long term, like 6 months after you get sick, if you live through it, what happens next. And so with her help, she helped me create a virus that was a hybrid between the herpes virus and bacterial meningitis. So it has like a great scientific, legit name and really horrifying symptoms. So sorry, people that are reading it.
Oh, it sounds really, really good. And it's fantastic that you did all that, research and, had that help to make it so real. I know that there are, different kinds of books that I've read where it's just something sort of made up and there isn't really anything to back it. But that is even better, to be able to say this actually makes sense.
Yeah, because I was just writing like random things. And when I was talking to Patty, my research assistant, and saying, oh, it's basically like leprosy. And she's like, that's not how leprosy works. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, but then remember, I went to school for theater. I can't do math or science. I haven't taken math or science since I was like 15. It's been so many years. So I
They
knew
didn't
when
teach
I,
anything worth learning, don't worry.
yeah.
Amber says, I love when
Oh,
writers do
thank
such
you.
good research so the story is believable. I totally agree with you, Amber. It makes all the difference.
Yeah. So I feel like there's like this one moment in Pretty Ugly where they say the scientific name of the disease. And I was just like so proud that it wasn't me. Like somebody else like was just like, this is what it would be called. Like she
Yeah.
understood how to name a virus, but and I was just like, and I got like chills all over. I'm just like, oh, that's so scary sounding.
That's great.
And it's a really long name, so the virus, much like in The Shining, ends up having a nickname for the virus. So I
Nice.
don't have to say like the da 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 da
Oh my God.
mutation like 1,000 times in the book.
Yeah.
It would have like doubled my word count, I think.
You get more page reads than on Kindle Unlimited.
Yeah.
I know. They'd be like, we get it. It's a crazy name of a virus.
That's great. We have so we have JD saying, well, it wasn't going to be Vicky the virus.
Nope. Not that.
Not thinking
That would have
about it.
been much easier.
In the comedy version, maybe.
I know. Eventually I'll write a comedy.
We'll see about that.
I have a short story that I have that is a comedy, but it is a serial killer origin story. So again, comedy is all relative.
Yeah. David is saying sometimes it can be hours or days of research for 1 or 2 words in the final book, but they're the right words. Oh my God. I so really
yeah, I feel like Christy and we have had this conversation where we were like, I researched something for 6 hours for one metaphor.
Oh my God, yes.
Just to like make sure it works. And then afterwards I'm like, should I cut that? Like, do I really need that? And I'm like, it's staying in.
It is totally worth it, Amber. You're right. It is always really, really worth it. Even when you find out stuff that you don't end up using somewhere along the lines you might. So it's
exactly. I know a lot about the history of when window screens were invented, and I've never had to use that.
But in some kind of party or conversation, it will come up.
I know. And people say, that girl is really boring.
The opposite. She knows everything. She's so interesting.
She knows everything about window screens and when the word restaurant was commonly used.
Yeah. You were talking about you were going into acting, and then your choreograph your dancing and everything else. JD Estrada asked, have you ever written a screenplay? Because that almost seems to coincide with acting and writing.
I started a play a million years ago, but that idea is what turned into my book, Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent. Because I realized I was writing a 3-person show, and the characters were the same as they are in Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, but I couldn't, on no budget and no understanding of how to do lighting or sound design, I couldn't convey what I wanted to convey about that story onto a stage. I think somebody much smarter and more technically abled than I am would be able to do that. And I would need to find an actress who is willing to be like drenched in seawater for like the entire time.
Depends how much you pay, I'm sure.
I know. And again, I had no budget. I was just like, I'm going to write this thing.
So did you took the screenplay and you kind of rewrote it as a novel?
I wrote I wrote it as a 1-act play. So most of it was not like, it was like the core idea of Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent was there. Mm-hmm. And then obviously it didn't work for multiple reasons. And it was going to be like my final project for school. And then I did something else. And then that kind of sat on the shelf. And many, many years later, I wanted to write a graphic novel because I'd been writing an independent comic. And I tried to find an artist because I thought Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent would be a great graphic novel. And I still think it would be. But I couldn't find the right artist. And again, it went back on the shelf. And just like for 20 years, it was just in my head, growing and changing and mutating and becoming something completely different. And then when I sat down and thought, oh, I should write that story idea. And I didn't know if I was writing a book. I didn't know if I was writing a short story, a novella. I didn't know what it was going to be. It started out as a poem and ended up as a novel that won the Kindle Award for the best horror of 2020, which is weird.
It happened when it was meant to happen, you know?
Yes, exactly. So people always say like, well, how long did it take you to write it? And I say, like 3 months and 20 years. Yeah. Because they're like, you wrote it so fast. And I'm like, yeah.
Look at that.
Look at that. Yeah. Just that 20 years of thinking about it almost every day.
That's like, Richard, actually, that's kind of how your all your series have worked, right? You had this idea for so long, right? And
the very first book that I wrote, I wrote it when I started writing it when I was 17, and I finished it when I was 50.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, it gets in the way, so.
Life does get in the way.
And it changed. I don't know how many titles I had for that book either.
See, my title always stayed the same, but the ending changed a few times.
Oh, my ending drastically changed by the time I finally got to it. Because like we were talking about earlier, one of my characters who was supposed to be integral to the ending of the book did something that he didn't make it to the end of the book. and then all of a sudden I had to come up with a new ending. But yeah,
yeah, there was a moment in Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent where my main character Adam just did something that I never planned on him doing, and I said, "Oh, that changes his mental state completely for the end of the book." And then I realized, and at that point, he wasn't even supposed to be my main character. He was just like actually supposed to be like a supporting character, and he ended up becoming the focus of the novel because he made one bad decision. So don't wrong me, people.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you punish him for that, yeah.
Yeah. I like to torture my characters psychologically and physically.
So going along that vein about how long it took to write it and how long it's been in your head, when did you actually first start writing, or when did you find that you actually wanted to write? Maybe not be a writer at that time, but is this something you enjoyed as a child, or is it something that happened then later on?
I loved writing as a kid. I feel like I was always a reader. So I'll say that, like I was obsessively a reader from first grade on. I read every single Nancy Drew book. I was the type of person who would take books out of the library and not return them, much to my parents' chagrin. And then one time I'd cut out my favorite parts of the book and then return the book.
Oh, we got it on video now.
Oh no, my parents knew because they were like, "We got a bill for $60 because you defaced this hardcover book." And I'm like, yeah. I just I couldn't give it up. Like it was already overdue, and I was so little, but it was already overdue, and I just like wanted to keep it so bad that I was like, what if I just took the parts that I need to have? So I wasn't allowed to take books out of the library for a long time. So I was always a reader. The first time I thought to myself, I want to be a writer, I know I was in third grade. I was in Catholic school. We had to write a prayer because it's Catholic school. And I wrote a prayer from the point of view of a cat. And I don't remember what the words were, but it was very short. And they published it in like the little school newspaper. And it was the first time I saw my name in print. And I was just like, oh, I am the fanciest person in my third grade class of 20 kids. So I think that's when I got the bug. Then in junior high, like I think most like pale, awkward girls, I was super bullied. I had to eat lunch in my English teacher's classroom. She said, make yourself useful, write a story. And I just started writing stories then. After that, I switched to poetry for a really long time. Like it was mainly poetry, besides my little like stint into trying to write a play. And then I wrote comics for a little bit. But I just kept telling myself I couldn't write a novel because I didn't know how. Even though I'd read thousands and thousands of novels, I just kept saying to myself, I don't know how. Like, you have to go to school and learn how to write a novel. Like, you need to take a class that shows you how to write a novel. And I convinced myself of that for way too long. And I think I just got to this point where I couldn't keep it inside anymore, which is why when I sat down to write Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, I think I would have had a panic attack had I said, I'm writing a novel. If I sat there and thought that, I just said, I'm just going to write something. I don't know what it is. And luckily it turned into a novel.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to that whole like it has to be this way or it has to be that way or I need to learn more or whatever. You know, some people end up taking so many writing classes they never get down to the actual writing. Yeah. So, you know, it's very relatable.
I honestly I hadn't taken any writing classes at all until this past year during the pandemic. And I thought, you know, there was an author, Diane Zinna, who she was on Vox Vomitus, and I loved her books so much. And I saw she was teaching a class and I said, I'm going to take a writing class. I've never done that. So I took a writing class and it's been amazing. But yeah, for so many years, I just really thought I would have to take a class that was called How to Write a Novel, like how to make this work. And again, my husband has been amazing for years. I was just like, well, once I go back to school, maybe I just need to get an MFA. I need to get my MFA. And if I get an MFA, I'll be writing a book and then I'll be able to write a book. And he was great. He was just like, why don't you just try writing a book? Just try writing.
It was good advice.
Yeah.
David Kelly says, horror or suspense? Pick one. Oh, boy.
That's Sophie's choice right there.
You're on the spot. You have to do it.
I know.
You must pick.
I must pick.
Drum roll.
Suspense.
Oh, I am surprised.
I am too, because I really wanted to like preface that with like psychological suspense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because that can be anything, but also horror can be anything. I've told people, they're like, "Oh, why do you write horror?" I'm like, "Oh, come on, everything's horror if you really think about it."
That's a good point. You can't make horror out of anything.
I know, like it really depends. I've read some romance novels and I'm like, ooh, that is horrifying.
Speaking of horror, Amber has a story. My college creative writing class actually ruined my writing style. It took me years to get back into it and be myself with the written word. That is so interesting.
I've heard
Amber.
this so much.
Yeah.
You know, and honestly, the person I've been taking classes with, Diane Zinna, had like a similar story where her MFA program was all men except her. And it didn't ruin her writing style, but it was just like so different to be only around like one gender. Like it changes how you write. So I've heard this not just from her, but from multiple people about like sometimes classes can, or schooling can like hurt, like emotionally, like because they focus on whatever the zeitgeist is at that moment. So, you know, like if snarky work is in and that's everything, that's what's selling, that's what people are going to be like, I want to publish, this is what I have to write. I have to be the next Bret Easton Ellis. I have to be the next blah, blah, blah. Instead of just like trying to figure it out who you are, which is why I love indie publishing, because you can just be your authentic self. So I'm glad I got my start in indie publishing, and I'll always indie publish on some level, no matter what, because I just like love being able to like take all the risks I want.
No, for sure. I always tell people we have Stephen King. You know, he's great. We don't need another one. We need a Jennifer Ann Gordon. So just
hey,
you write. Yeah, exactly. So I'm just conscious of the time, Jennifer. Thanks for coming on and sharing your books and stuff with us. So you mentioned that you got a release coming up on July
13th.
Now the 13th is did you pick that number just because it's 13?
No. So books tend to release on Tuesdays, and I had originally thought July 6th, but then one of my very favorite authors in the entire world, Carol Goodman, was releasing her book on July 6th. And she's a huge name. She's a New York Times bestseller, but like, I just like wanted to like spend that day saying, happy book birthday, Carol Goodman.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pushed mine to July, even though like it wouldn't matter. Like we're in different leagues. I love her so much, and she's become a friend, and I love her new book so much that I had the ability to move my book release 1 week. And I'm glad I did, because I have my first in-person book signing in a bookstore, sold out event happening that night.
Good for you.
That's exciting. Congratulations.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very nervous. As a lifelong performer, I'm usually not nervous, but I'm nervous for this because
I'm sure it'll
just
go
because.
Once you're there, you'll be fine.
I'm nervous about things like signing my name so many times. Like that I haven't practiced my like author signature enough.
Just gotta scribble. That's all I do. I scribble.
It's usually just like a J and something for me.
So what's next after the release on the 13th? What have you got planned?
So I am working on something.
Oh yeah, right.
You can't really talk about.
Right. Okay.
I can't really talk about it. But
don't help her not talk about it. Drag it out.
I almost got her to say it. I was trying. I almost got her to do it.
I know. I was like, should I just say it? So I am working on something that I hope to have finished at some point this summer, that my amazing agent Paula Moonier will be shopping around for me. I do have some short stories I've been working on that would be indie published, taking like inspiration from you, Christy, because you've released some amazing short stories in the past few months, and I love that. And so I have like a handful of things that might be seeing their way to Amazon or someplace in like October-ish, maybe a short story. Might even be a short story. Werewolf.
Ooh. So that leads us into, where can readers find your books?
Oh, they can find them everywhere, but the easiest place, Christy's gone. She's left. The easiest place. Oh,
She's looking for your book, I think.
I know she
Sorry,
probably.
guys.
Like, Chrissy left. The easiest place to find me is jenniferannegordon.com, and that's Anne with an E. And my website has links, if you click on any of my books, to all of the book buying places. So I personally, political beliefs, believe that you should go to bookshop.org or IndieBound and support your local independent bookstore. But Amazon, I know, is easiest for most people, Barnes & Noble as well. So, I mean, I'm everywhere, but please support your local independent bookstores. It's been a really long pandemic for them. And
For
please,
sure.
please help them.
That's awesome. So thanks again for coming on. So
Thank you.
Just before we leave, I want to ask Christy if she's got anything new that she wants to announce while we're got her on.
I don't have any major announcements or anything. I did finally totally finish editing my Nanopunk novella. So that's been, the final version has been run past my editor and she gave it the okay. So it's totally done. And I'll be moving on to book 2 actually right away. So that is really exciting for me, especially because it's so different. So that is my big news this week. How about for you, Richard?
I've got chills.
I just finished, we just submitted to Audible our next audiobook. We just finished the edits today, and we got the 5-minute segment yet, and we got it uploaded. And now we're exploring going wide through Findaway Voices. We're thinking about taking the next step and paying per finished hour and starting to go wide with audiobooks from this point on. But there's some details we got to hammer out yet. But I'm going to stay with the same narrator, Mikhail Roberts, who's been awesome. His voices are incredible. So if you get a chance to listen to Mikhail Roberts narrate, he's an up-and-coming voice actor for sure. And I also got in the mail, because I'm looking forward to book events. I'm in Canada, so we're not as open as you guys are in the U.S. We probably don't have book events until at least late fall. Uh-oh.
Jennifer has disappeared.
She said her internet might do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's okay. So anyway, I've got some merchandise now. Here she comes. I'll bring her back in.
I got her.
I warned you.
Don't worry.
You didn't warn us.
So anyway,
I warned Richard.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I was going to say that you made it through, but not quite. But that's kind of cool. It was like you just appeared like a ghost, so that's kind of fitting. But anyway, so if we get our book events going, I've got now merchandise for me. I'm not selling it because the stuff's so expensive. But where's that camera? There it is. So this is the book that I just released the other week. Keeper the Jewel. So it's just kind of neat to have it on my table when I'm doing events and signing books. I can have this here. And because of the pandemic, or whatever virus thing you've got going on, if that happens, I've got also a couple mounts here too with
nice
on them as well. So that's kind of fun. Now, all I can do is hope and pray that these book events are going to happen in Canada sooner than later. And hopefully, we get the vaccines rolled out. But it is what it is. And so next week's guest. And I say guests, they're plural. We're going to have 2 people appearing next Tuesday on Lurking for Legends. Will be the creative partnership of David Ellis, who we've had on the show before, talking about his own personal works when he was on. And I'm going to screw this lady's name up. It's Cindrine, Sindrine. I remember him saying it. I'm thinking, that doesn't sound like the way it looks. But I'm going to say Sindrine Morat, Marrouat.
She will correct you. It's French.
I have trouble with the English language. So
yeah.
These other languages is totally alien to my tongue. Anyway, so David and Sindrine are the founders of the poetry journal Auroras and Blossoms. So it'll be nice to hear exactly what that is all about, and it promises to be a great episode. So until then, Christy and I and Jennifer wish everyone to have a happy and amazing week, and take good care, my friends.
Thank you.